Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. Now today what I'm going to bring you is my 2022 Bradford City return list. Now if you do go on to enjoy today's video, please make sure you drop a like on it. If you could try and hit 70 likes on today's video, that'd be massively appreciated. Subscribe if you are new as well. We are on the road to 6,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for 5,500 subscribers, but make sure you are subscribed if you haven't already. Get your post notification bell on as well so you never miss a video of when I upload. And make sure as well to drop a comment in down in the comment section down below. Who do you want to keep? Who do you want to retain out of all the players who are out of contract for next season? We have 12 Bradford City players that are out of contract in the summer. We also have 6 loan players that we are going to speak about as well. Share the video around with your family and friends as well. Now, we've obviously got a lot to talk about, a lot of players to get through, so let's waste no further time and let's get into it. Now, before we get into my thoughts on each and every individual player, please make sure to take into account what I say throughout the whole segment. Please don't just look at me saying that X player should stay or X player should leave and take it for face value. Please make sure you listen to everything that I have to say before you comment, because I can't be bothered arguing in the comments down below because somebody hasn't been bothered to listen to what I actually had to say about the video. Also, the reason why I'm doing this before the season actually ends is because I believe we'll probably end up posting our return list on like the Monday after the Carlisle game, and I want to have time to get my return list out before the actual return list comes out so I can react to that. Probably might do a live reaction, not a live stream, but I will live react to my return list when it does come out, so enjoy the video. So as you can see, we are on tier list maker once again. We have every single one of the Bradford City players who are contracted with us in the summer. Now obviously some players who are on loan from other clubs won't be out of contract with their current club, like Dion Pereira, Alex Bass, but we're still going to speak about them anyway, and we could maybe get them on loan again for next season or potentially a permanent deal as well. We are going to start out then with Matty Daly, and now this is probably the easiest one on the list. He went back to Huddersfield about a month or two ago, hardly played under Mark Hughes, and when he played under Derek Adams, he was absolutely abysmal. You know, he came with a lot of expectation from coming in from Hartlepool. He was recalled by Huddersfield and sent pretty much straight away out on loan to Bradford City. We thought, you know, we've got ourselves another decent player here. Hartlepool fans seemed to rate him until they had their managerial change, but it just did not work out for him. Every game that I saw him play, he just completely was anonymous in the game, tried to like hide and not really want the ball. When he did, he just make the easy 5-yard pass. He scored a goal on one of his first appearances for the club away at Walsall, and apart from that, did absolutely nothing. So pretty easy one for me. Release / don't loan back, if you get what I mean. Like, I'm not interested in Matty Daly coming back to Bradford City. Next up then is Nathan Delfonso, and again another pretty straightforward one, to be honest with you. I'm not interested in him coming back to Bradford City. I think he's out of contract with Bolton in the summer. He's obviously a player signed by Derek Adams. Features on the bench now and again under Hughes' first couple of games in charge, but has not even been anywhere near the matchday squad, to be honest with you, these last couple of matches, and it's just not really worked out. At the time when we signed him on deadline day, we didn't think it was the greatest of signings. He's come in, not scored a goal. I don't believe he's got an assist either. He's been played quite a lot on the wing, not really been given an opportunity up front, to be honest with you, and yeah, not being great, and definitely not a player who I'd want to bring back in the summer. Next up then is Tom Elliott, now a man who was brought in on loan from Salford City, so you're going to presume that he is on a decent wage. Hasn't really worked out for him at Bradford City. He did actually score a goal away at Oldham, but for whatever bizarre unknown reason, it wasn't allowed. And then when Mark Hughes came in, he picked up a knee injury just before that, and he's had setback after setback and was ruled out until the end of the season a couple of weeks ago. So just not really worked out for him. When he did play, didn't look too good as well, to be honest with you, so he's another player that I wouldn't look to bring back in next season. As you can see, 3 for 3 so far. Players I'd not be interested in bringing him next season. Obviously, Derek Adams' loan recruits in January, only 1 or 2 of them have maybe worked out, and we'll speak about a little bit them next up. Coming in 4th on today's list, and this is one where I think it won't be pretty much as straightforward. There's some positives to Alex Bass, but for me personally, there's just far too many negatives at the moment. The amount of games that he's cost us him recently, he's just giving away far too many points. You know, as much as he did make a really good debut, and he has made some really good saves now and again. If you think about the Swindon game where he gave a penalty away, cost us 2 points. The Port Vale game, the second goal should have never gone in, cost us 2 points in that one. The Scunthorpe game, which is only very recently, he gave away an absolutely horrendous goal in that one. I think about his kicking in the game against Northampton. Don't get me wrong, he did make some world-class saves in that Walsall game, and we've seen it in a lot of other games for us, you know, in that Tuesday night game away at Stevenage as well. I remember he was absolutely fantastic, but just far too inconsistent for me, to be honest with you. And I think we can probably get better. Obviously, we will have Sam Hornby next season. We'll speak about Richard O'Donnell a little bit later because he's out of contract in the summer. Sam Hornby already contracted with us until next season, but has pretty much sat on the bench for the majority of the time with his loan spell at Colchester. Bass is probably going to go back and be Portsmouth's number one, which I don't know how that'll go, to be honest with you, with them, because he hasn't set the world on fire for us, because he's been decent at times, but he just made far too many errors, and for me, personally, not a player I'd look to bring back next season. Next up then is Jamie Walker, on loan from Hearts, signed in January. I believe he's our first signing in January as well. I'm also pretty sure he's out of contract with Hearts in the summer. Scored 3 goals and got 1 assist in his 17 appearances for us. Obviously had a little bit of an injury when he did join. Had a fantastic first 45 minutes against Salford when he did join. Then had a pretty rough patch when he's injured. He was coming in and out of the squad constantly, but these last couple of games under Mark Hughes, I have been very impressed with, and I think overall he's a player who I would look to retain. Now, he's probably going to be on a decent amount of money coming in from a Scottish Premier League club. He's not a player who I would absolutely break the bank for, but in this new role that he's been playing kind of off the striker, playing as pretty much like a second striker at times, I think it really does suit him. He's much more of a striker rather than a midfielder, if you get what I mean, but he loves to get stuck in. His pressing, his running is absolutely fantastic, and the only thing that I've been really critical of him with in his last, apart from the last couple of performances before that, was his lack of goal contributions. He wasn't really scoring. He got a nice goal away at Stevenage, but wasn't really picking up all too much, and that's what you want from an attacking midfield, and that is something that Callum Cook was criticised for quite a lot. But for me personally, I've seen enough of him now to think that he's not just a luxury player. He is going to do the hard yards, and he does a lot of running, and like I said, I wouldn't break the bank for him, but if the option is there at the end of the season, I would like to see Jamie Walker stay. And the final loan player is Dion Pereira. Now, I'm not too sure what his contract situation is with Luton. Apparently, at the start of the season, he signed an extension with them, but the length of that extension was unknown. He's a player who must be kept at all costs. If we can get him back next season, if he's a permanent, that'll be absolutely fantastic, but I'd take a loan. He's an absolute joy to watch. He just gets the ball, and he's on ice skates, to be honest with you. He gets the ball, he just goes past 3, 4, 5 players so casually, so elegant on the ball. Sometimes his final product can be a little bit of a letdown, but he's such a joy to watch that for that reason alone, we've got to keep him. Now, he probably is a player I'd look to break the bank for to bring him in. I'm not saying give him what he wants. Don't give him 10 grand a week. We've got to be realistic because we have not got the biggest budget in the league, especially with some of the teams that could be coming up from the National League. You're competing with the likes of Salford as well. So he's an absolute joy to watch, though, he's Dion Pereira. And fingers crossed, if Luton do go up, I think we've got a chance of a permanent deal. If they don't go up, potentially a loan, but I think more than likely he will go to League One. If the option is there, though, Dion Pereira is definitely a player I would love to come back next season. Now then, we've got the loan players out of the way. We're going to move on to the 12 contracted players that I do believe that there is here who are obviously out of contract with us in the summer. First up is Gareth Evans. Now, a man who was brought in last season by Stuart McCall, came in with so much, not potential, but so much promise and expectation from Portsmouth, a club legend down in the South Coast, but it's just not worked out for him at Bradford City whatsoever. His second spell with the club last year was used more as a left winger, and I think he got like 4 or 5 goal contributions. This season started off playing as a central midfielder under Derek Adams, and he looked a lot better. Then was frozen out of the squad for 3, 4, 5 months until Mark Hughes came back in. Had a good couple of performances once Hughes came in, but since then he's just been putting in average performance after average performance, and he's not an inspiring football. He's probably going to be on one of the better paid players at the club as well, coming in from Portsmouth. There was a lot of expectations, so I presume he's going to be one of them higher paid players at the club, and he's just not delivering. When Gareth Evans is coming onto the pitch or you see him in the starting lineup, you don't get excited like what you do with a Pereira or a Walker. Now, maybe you could argue they play different roles in the team, but for me, Evans just doesn't do enough, and he hasn't done enough in his 2 years to warrant a new contract, so I'd let him move on, but I think he'll be more than fine with getting another League 2 club, to be honest with you. Next up then is Callum Cook. Now, this one for me is a really tough one. You could argue that if you keep him Walker, you can't keep Cook, or you keep Cook, you can't keep Walker, because they're two very similar players and they do want to play in very similar roles. Cook's obviously been with us for 3 seasons now, once on loan under Gary Bowyer, then Stuart McCall signed him permanently on a 2-year contract. That's obviously coming to an end this summer, and for an attacking midfield, I think he's played something like 80 games for Bradford City now, and he's scored 5 or 6 goals. He's got a decent amount of assists, but I think the main thing you need to look at is like key passes and chances created, because that, if he's not getting assists, that's not his fault a lot of the time. If his key passes are up there and the other players are just not finishing them, you can't blame that on Callum Cook. And for some reason, under Mark Hughes, he's not really been given all too much of an opportunity. In the games where he has started, like Hartlepool, etc., he's looked fantastic, but he's also had some pretty poor games this season. And Cook is definitely an interesting one. Now, again, he's not a player who I'd absolutely break the bank for. If he went out to another League 2 or even League 1 club, I think he'd do absolutely fantastic there. I think he would be a player I'd look to retain, but I wouldn't be absolutely heartbroken if he was to leave the club, if it meant we could get somebody like a Pereira on a permanent basis. Now, I know Pereira plays a lot more on the wing recently, but Cook, not the quickest, and, you know, his goal contributions is something that you do need to look at. And as much as I love Callum Cook, if he was to be released, I don't think it'd be the end of the world. If he goes to another club, I think he'd absolutely smash it, because that's just the Bradford City thing. For me personally, I would like to see Callum Cook stay. That's going to be an interesting one, as I'm sure a few of these are. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section down below. Next up then is Lee Angle. Now, this is probably going to come as one of the more controversial, debatable ones on this list. Now, I've seen a lot of people saying that get him on a pay-as-you-play contract, which I think is very disrespectful to Lee Angle. Yes, he's had 2 major injuries this season, and injuries has been a massive problem for him. When he was brought in from Leyton Orient, we didn't really look at his injury record. It was more just his goals and how well he'd done at Leyton Orient, which was really poor. But since he's come in, when he has been fit and when he has been available, he's been absolutely fantastic. And his past couple of games, when you watch Andy Cook play and then Lee Angle comes on, or like in the Scunthorpe game, when Angle starts and then he goes off, you notice the difference. He's so good and such a joy to watch. The only downside to Lee Angle is his injury record. If he didn't have that injury record, I think he'd be playing League 1 Championship football, because he's so good. If you can get him on maybe a little bit less wage, but an actual like appearance fee be a little bit higher, I think he's definitely a player you'd look to retain. For me personally, I think when fit, he is the best striker we currently have at Bradford City. Now, I know he doesn't have the most competition. I personally keep Lee Angle. Maybe you go with another 1-year contract. Like I said, cut his wage a little bit if he's willing to do that, because he said it openly that he wants to stay at Bradford City. But if he's fit and available, then you give him a bonus for that, because I don't think it'd be fair just to not pay him if he's not available, because players do get injured. It's part and parcel of football. And under Mark Hughes, we seem to, I mean, we've barely had any injuries, have we? Because we're not rushing them back and we're not forcing them to play football when they're clearly not fit enough, which is what we were doing under previous managers, even Stuart McCall last season, and we've had it a lot this season with Derek Adams. If Angle's not forced back from injury and he doesn't have to do too many sprints, we're not just constantly playing the ball in behind for him to sprint onto, which, you know, we haven't been playing like that at all. You know, the ball's played up to Angle, he pins his man well, he brings others into play, technically he's brilliant, and he's, you know, he's got more than enough goals in him. I think he's got 6 goals so far for us this season, and he's barely, I won't say he's barely played, but he's not played all too many matches. When he does play, you know, your team are going to do better, and for me personally, he's a player I'd retain. Up next then is Theo Robinson, a man who was brought in on transfer deadline day under Derek Adams and was the absolute definition of a panic signing. He was unregistered from Port Vale squad last season so they could register Curtis Guthrie. That tells you everything you need to know. Had a decent period in between November and December. Scored a couple of goals. I think he scored 4 goals in all competitions, but simply just not up to the level, to be honest with you. He's a fantastic bloke. I've met him and all that sort of stuff, but in terms of football, if we're going for League 2 promotion next season, you need to be getting players better than Theo Robinson. So I wish him all the best. I think he might struggle to get another League 2 club, maybe somebody like a Stevenage or a Barrow, with all due respect, battling down there. I know we are, you know, near them in the table at the moment, but going into next season, we'll obviously have much better aspirations. I'm sure other clubs will have aspirations to be higher up in the table, but realistically, Theo Robinson just isn't going to be good enough to play for Bradford City, so he'd be one that I look to let go. Next up then is Paudie O'Connor, current club captain at Bradford City. Obviously was vice captain before Niall Canavan left the club. He's been with us for 3.5 seasons now, obviously 3 seasons permanently, and he's a player who I would personally give a new contract. Now, I've seen some people on social media saying that he's been a part of the problem and part of the amount of goals that we've conceded, and as much as, you know, everybody has to take blame for when you concede a goal, I don't see how Paudie can be blamed for this season being so poor. I think he's been one of the bright sparks in a poor team, to be honest with you. I think he leads the team very well for such a young footballer. He's very experienced, but I think he does need somebody more experienced next to him, like a Niall Canavan, because we've seen it in the past couple of games. Well, not past couple of games, past few months, where his temper can get a little bit too much, and we saw it in the Oldham game where he got sent off. Obviously, that did get rescinded, but he missed the game against Scunthorpe at the weekend, and he might struggle to get back into the team now. I don't think Kelleher was absolutely incredible. You know, he wasn't like Sergio Ramos, but he did a decent job and poured it out of contract in the summer. I think he will probably get a new contract, and he's definitely a player who I look to retain. Now, we've already heard about the interest from Sheffield Wednesday and clubs like that. You know, if Sheffield Wednesday are in the Championship, don't think we really stand much chance of keeping him. But for me personally, he's a player who I would look to retain. Next up then is Keelan Lavery. Now, this might come as a little bit of a shock, but Lavery is a player who I would look to retain. Now, let me explain myself. I think if we get another striker in the summer, and then you have Angle and Cook as your other two strikers. It depends what formation we play. Say we play the one up front and we get X striker in. He's our main striker. If Angle's fit, which there's a 50% chance Lee Angle is going to be fit. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the guy, but he is obviously quite clearly injury prone. Angle is your second choice striker, or Andy Cook can be an option as well. Obviously, different types of strikers. Keelan Lavery as a fourth choice striker, you're not exactly going to be breaking the bank to keep him, and I think he is a good technical player. We saw it in the half an hour spell that he had against Scunthorpe that he did all right. You know, considering he's not the tallest, he does do quite well to hold the ball up as a lone striker. I think if you're absolutely desperate, chucking someone like a Keelan Lavery on, he might get you a couple goals a season. I think if he'd have played every game this season, he'd have got between 5 and 10 goals. And let me, reiterate that as a fourth choice striker, he would be someone I'd look to retain. I think you probably have to give him a little bit of a pay cut, but again, if he was to be released, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I wouldn't be losing any sleep over Lavery being released, because obviously he has only scored the one goal for Bradford City, and you look at the goals and you think Robinson scored 4 times the amount of goals as Lavery, but in terms of actual technical ability, I think Lavery much suits the Mark Hughes system, and I don't think he'll get offered a new contract because he's obviously not done enough for me under Mark Hughes, but I think we've seen as a whole that there is a player in him. If you give him a 1-year contract, I think he probably would take it, but like I said, I'm not going to lose too much sleep over him if he is to be released. Up next then is Richard O'Donnell. Obviously spent the last 4 years with the football club, was with us in our final year as a League One football club, and ever since then we have been constantly on the decline. Now, I'm not saying he's been the reason for that. I think in his first season he was actually quite a decent goalkeeper. He lost his place towards the end under Ben Wilson. Then in the 1920 season, lost his place through injury for a little bit to Luke McGee. Then last season got another injury and lost his place to Sam Hornby, and they were battling for the shirt for the rest of the season. Then obviously this season started out as the number 1, but in January we brought in Alex Bass and lost his place to him, and he hasn't had an opportunity under Mike Hughes, which makes me think O'Donnell's already said I'm planning on leaving in the summer. He was obviously linked with Hartlepool in the transfer window as well, or maybe he's planning on retiring. I'm not really too sure, but like I said a bit about Robinson, he's absolutely fantastic personality, and I love what he's done off the pitch for Bradford City, but on the pitch I do think it's time to move on. We've obviously got Sam Hornby coming back on loan from Colchester. I think if he's your backup and you get a new number 1 in, I think that'll probably be for the best. O'Donnell, I think it's probably just time to move on now. You know, we've had 4 seasons with him, and for me personally, he's not a player who I'd look to retain in the summer. We seem to have a lot of midfielders and forwards out of contract, and next up is Elliot Watney. If I'd been doing this with Derek Adams still as our manager, he'd probably been one of the first players in that release list, but under Mark Hughes, he's been an absolute different animal. He's made a man reborn, and he's definitely a player who I'd look to keep. Do I think he'll stay? Probably not. I think he'll have an offer from a League One or a Championship club, and he probably will go there. He had obviously interest from Norwich and Blackpool in January, and at the time Bradford City fans were saying they'd snap your hand off for 300k, which was what was being rumoured at the time, and he was obviously liking tweets about that, which, wasn't the greatest thing. But under Mark Hughes, I think the system suits him a lot better. We saw in that Scunthorpe game, the win didn't help, but he was pulling strings, and we've seen it in plenty of times under Mark Hughes. The way he switches the ball so calmly, or he can play them killer through balls. Sometimes, I hear from fans around me where I'm sat in the stadium, and I hear people complaining that he always passes sideways or backwards, but you need a player like that. Don't get me wrong, he does pass forwards quite a lot, so I don't really understand that, but you do need a player just to switch it out the other side and keep the play ticking. I think he's a player, if if he wants to stay and if the terms are right, he's definitely a player who I'd look to keep, but I think he will probably move on and go to a League One or a Championship club. Next up then is Luke Hendry, was brought back in January for either his second or third spell with the football club, signed from Hartlepool after terminating his contract there, and don't get me wrong, he's done decent, he's been much better than Oscar Threlke. I think he's been slightly better than Finn Cousin-Dawson. I don't think Hendry would be a bad backup, but when you've already got Threlke and Cousin-Dawson contracted for next season, I think Threlke probably will move on in the summer, but if you got Finn Cousin-Dawson as a backup, I don't really see how Hendry fits in, because I don't think he's good enough, to be honest, as your starting right back. We've seen it quite a lot where he's done a decent job, he puts his body on the line, but he's just kind of an average fullback and he doesn't do too much. I think if we are serious about challenging for promotion next season, we need fullbacks who are going to be able to cross the ball and put great balls in, but it takes him about 5 or 6 crosses to put an accurate cross into the box, and I know we don't put too many players into the box, but I remember specifically in that game against Tranmere on Good Friday, when the amount of time he had to put, he had about 10-15 crosses. He had so many crosses into that box, especially in the first half, and there was only 1 or 2 that were successful. Andy Cook was fuming at him, and for me personally, I think we probably can get better, and I know he's obviously a Bradford lad and he loves the club and he felt like he had unfinished business, and if he was to stay, wouldn't be the end of the world, but for me, it just doesn't really make sense if you've already got 2 other right backs. I think we need to bring in another one, a better one than Luke Hendry, which is a shame. Now, I think Mark Hughes will be pretty ruthless with the return list, because at the end of the day, we're going to be finishing bottom half probably in the table, and you can't keep a full squad of players who are just simply not good enough. Like, out of all the retained players, I think we'll probably only keep 3, 4, 5 at the absolute maximum, and he's going to need to dwindle that down really tightly. But for me personally, Luke Hendry is not a player who I would look to keep. Next up then is Levi Sutton. Now, Levi Sutton's a very interesting one, because the previous 18, 19 months before Mark Hughes came in, he was one of the better players. His energy in the midfield was absolutely fantastic, even when a lot of the time we were questioning players' commitment and endeavour towards the club in some of the performances we saw under Derek Adams especially. He was one of the players who would always get clapped off and cheered off, even when, we comfortably lost against a really poor team. And under Mark Hughes, he's rarely had an opportunity, to be honest with you. He's not really been given a chance. He's been playing out of position as well at left wing or at right back. He's not been given an opportunity in central midfield. Now, don't get me wrong, we have better technical players on the ball than Levi Sutton, like Gilead, like Watt, like Gareth Evans, but I think he offers you something different in that midfield. He's always going to chase things down. He's quite quick. He can carry the ball up the pitch. He's very energetic, and for me personally, he's a player who I would look to retain, but I've just got a really bad feeling that for some reason, because he's not as technically gifted as some of the other players at the football club, I don't think Mark Hughes will give him a new contract, which is a shame, because I really do like Levi Sutton. He gives you something different in that midfield, because it's all well and good having technical players, but like in that Port Vale game where you need someone who's going to be a battler and get stuck into challenges, that's where I think you'd need someone like a Levi Sutton. Now, he's not a strong powerhouse sort of midfielder like what we thought Jan Songo was going to be when he was brought in. The different types of players where Sutton gives you more energy. I would keep him, but I don't think Mark Hughes will, to be honest with you. The penultimate player then on this list is Matty Folds. Now, I think as a backup, Matty Folds would be a decent option. I think he probably will stay as well, because the fact that Mark Hughes has, he played him for a couple of matches while obviously Liam Ridehalgh was unavailable through his concussion injury. The fact that Folds was out of contract in the summer, Liam Ridehalgh is already available and will be staying with us next season, makes me think that he's already made his mind up, and we were doing really well when Folds was playing in a lot of them games, so I think Matty Folds will stay. Now, when he plays week in, week out, you do see the mistake that he has gotten in, because I think, he's only young, 24 or something like that. I'm not saying he's a teenager, he should be cutting them sort of mistakes out now, and I think as he plays more, you would see him cut less mistakes out if he played 30, 40 games, but I don't think he's going to do that. I think as a backup, he's a decent option, but if he was to be a player who would be released, then it wouldn't be the end of the world. I think we could probably get better, but with him being a Bradford fan, all that sort of stuff, I think it would make sense to keep him. But like I said, if he was to be released, I don't think it would be the end of the world. And the final player on this list is Charles Vernam. Now, I think that one pretty much speaks for itself. He's one of the very few players who would absolutely break the bank to keep. I think he's got 6 goals and I'm not too sure how many assists, maybe 6 or 7 assists as well. I think he's got our highest amount of goal contributions. Maybe Andy Cook has more. I'm not too sure on that one. But Vernon has missed a decent amount of the season this year through injury, which is a shame. Obviously, if he was fit, Derek Adams was pretty much forcing him back through injury. Even if he'd not played for a month, he'd force him to play 90 minutes, which was a real shame because we saw a lot of reoccurring hamstring injuries onto Charles Vernon. Now, it's been different under Mark Hughes. He said that. Will Vernon stay? I think Hughes probably will offer him a contract. I don't think he'll stay though, unfortunately. I think he will probably move on to a League One football club because he's quite clearly one of the best wingers in this league. Sometimes his consistency does get questions. I think on smaller pitches it doesn't really suit him. But the way he just gets the ball, and a bit like Pereira, not as silky, but he gets the ball, he's confident to take on 2 or 3 players. He's not scared of taking a shot on as well. For me personally, I'd break the bank to keep Charles Vernon. I do think he's really, really good, but I think he will probably move on, which is a real shame, to be honest with you. But there we have it then, my 2022 Bradford City return list. In the release category, I've got Matty Daly, Nathan Delfonso, Tom Elliott, Alex Bass, Gareth Evans, Theo Robinson, Richard O'Donnell and Luke Kendry. In the return category, I've gone with Jamie Walker, Dion Pereira, Callum Cook, Lee Angle, Paudie O'Connor, Keelan Lavery, Elliot Watt, Levi Sutton, Matty Folds and Charles Vernon. Now, please, once again, make sure you watch the full segment on each player because there's obviously a reason why I've decided to keep them or release them. If you could do different categories like keep at all costs, potentially keep, that sort of stuff, then maybe it would be understood a little bit better. But I understand if some players were to stay or some players were to leave, it wouldn't be the end of the world. The more important ones are like your Dion Pereiras, your Paudie O'Connors, your Elliot Watts with the system that we're playing, and your Charles Vernon. They're the most important ones. And now I wanted to do this video before the Bradford City release their return list because I presume we're going to release it pretty much straight after the season ends, which is why I'm doing it with 2 games that's still to play. Now, if you have enjoyed watching today's video, please make sure you hit a like on it. If you could try and hit 70 likes, as I said at the start of today's video, that would be absolutely class. Subscribe if you are new as well. We are now on the road to 6,000 subscribers, so make sure you are subscribed if you haven't already. Get your post notification bell on as well so you don't miss a video of when I upload. And make sure as well to drop a comment in down in the comment section down below. Which players would you keep? Which players would you release in the summer? Share the video around with your family and friends as well. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for watching and I shall see you all very soon for another one. Peace.